Have you ever just wished you could see the world with completely fresh eyes? You know, without all your assumptions, your biases, everything you think you already know? Well, there was a philosopher, Edmund Husserl, who dedicated his entire life to figuring out how to do exactly that. He developed this incredibly powerful method he called phenomenology, and it's really a journey to uncover reality as it actually is.
And look, for Husserl, this wasn't just some abstract academic puzzle. No, this was a deeply personal quest. You can feel it when he writes in his journal about the torments of uncertainty, something we all know, right? He was driven. He had to find a solid foundation for what we can know, a way to get real clarity. So he wasn't just a thinker in an ivory tower, he was a man on a mission.
So, to really get what he came up with, we're going to follow in his footsteps. Think of it like we're climbing a mountain to a whole new viewpoint. We'll start by looking at the problem he was trying to solve, then we'll get into his radical method, explore a bit about how consciousness actually works, and keep climbing all the way up to his biggest idea, what he called bracketing reality.
Okay, so let's start on the ground floor. Why on earth did Husserl feel like we needed a whole new method for thinking? Well, he saw this fundamental problem with how we think we know things. You know, we tend to put science on a pedestal as the gold standard of pure objective truth. But Husserl pointed out that even science works within certain frameworks or paradigms. It's shaped by traditions, by accepted theories, and yes, sometimes by just pure wishful thinking. The point is, our knowledge is never as pure as we like to believe. We're always looking through some kind of lens.
So, to get around this problem, Husserl came up with a totally new kind of philosophy. His goal was to make it a rigorous science, not a science of atoms or stars, but a science of our experience of the world itself.
His whole mission was to bypass all the theories, all the cultural baggage, all the scientific assumptions, all the labels we just slap onto everything. His famous motto was, "To the things themselves." He wanted to understand things exactly as they show up to our consciousness, before we start judging them and putting them in boxes.
Now, to actually do that, we have to take our first step up the mountain. And that means understanding a few crucial things Husserl discovered about how our minds really operate. First, he talks about our natural consciousness. This is basically our everyday autopilot mode. It's how we walk around just assuming the world is, well, just there. It's a solid fact, and it exists exactly how we see it. It's the world before all theory, and it has this silent, baked-in assumption that what you see is what you get. And the most important thing about that consciousness is what he called intentionality. It's a simple but profound idea. Our minds are never just blank. Consciousness is always of something. It's an active thing, a constant reaching out. You're not just conscious in a vague way. You are conscious of your phone, of a memory, of the feeling of being tired. It's always directed.
So what does this look like in the real world? Okay, imagine you see someone. You don't see all of them at once, right? You see their front, then maybe you walk past and see their side, and then their back. Each of those is a totally separate perception. But your mind doesn't just see a jumble of images. It actively stitches them all together into the single unified idea of one whole person. That's intentionality at work.
Okay, so if our mind is always busy piecing experiences together, how do we ever get to the truth of a thing? Well, now we're climbing a little higher, to Husserl's technique for finding the unchanging essence of any object or idea you can think of.
He called this core essence the eidos, and to get to it, he developed this amazing two-step thought experiment. This is where we get to be really active and use our imagination.
The first step is called eidetic variation. Basically, you take an object, anything at all, and in your mind, you just start changing it in every possible way you can think of. You push its boundaries, you change its color, its size, its material. You just play with all the possibilities, completely free.
Let's try it with something simple, like a triangle. We can imagine a right-angled one, an isosceles one. We can picture a triangle drawn in the sand, or one made of stars in the night sky. It could be huge, tiny, red, blue, a real one, or just one you're thinking about. We just keep imagining more and more variations.
So then comes the second step, eidetic reduction. After you've imagined all those different triangles, you ask one simple question. What's the one thing that stayed the same through every single one of those variations? What's the core structure that, if you took it away, would make it not a triangle anymore?
And after all that mental play, what are we left with? Well, the essence, the eidos, of a triangle is just this, a three-sided planar figure. The color didn't matter. The size didn't matter. What it was made of didn't matter.
That core structure is the one thing that made every single variation a triangle. We've just found its essence. Pretty cool, right? And now we've made it to the summit. This is Husserl's most radical, most powerful move. It's a complete shift in our entire attitude toward the world. He called it the epoché, or what we can call the great bracketing. And this creates a huge difference in perspective. See, in our natural consciousness, our default mode, we just assume the world exists, and we focus on the objects in that world. But in what Husserl calls phenomenological consciousness, we stop assuming. We treat the world's existence as just one possibility, and we shift our focus to the very acts of consciousness themselves, the seeing, the remembering, the feeling. The epoché is the mental move of putting our belief in the external world into brackets. Now, this is really important. This does not mean you deny that the world exists. It's way more subtle than that. It just means you temporarily suspend your judgment on the question. You just set that belief aside for a moment so you can study the pure experience without that big assumption getting in the way.
Husserl himself explains it perfectly. He says we put our belief out of action. We switch it off. So when you look at a table and bracket your belief that it's real, you don't actually stop believing it. The belief is still there, you just make no use of it. You become a neutral observer of your own mind having that belief.
So, after all that hard intellectual climbing, what's the payoff? Why does any of this matter? What's the view from the top really like?
Well, the applications are actually huge. This way of thinking lets us create bigger ideas that can bridge different fields of science. By looking for the essential structures underneath our cultural differences, it can help us actually understand each other better. And maybe most importantly, it gives us a powerful tool to spot and neutralize our own rigid dogmatic thinking, which lets us get to the real core of any problem.
So, to wrap up our whole climb, here it is in 6 steps. 1. You become aware of your default mode, your natural consciousness. 2. You recognize that your mind is always active, always intentional. 3 and 4. You play with possibilities through variation until you find the limits. 5. You reduce everything down to find that core essence. And finally, the summit. You apply the great epoché, bracketing your assumptions to see your own mind in action.
And really, this all brings us to a final thought for you to take away. Phenomenology isn't just some old philosophy. It's a practice. It's an invitation to ask yourself, what obvious truths in my own life, what beliefs that I never ever questioned, could I try putting inside brackets, just for a moment? Just to see what the world and what my own mind looks like in a completely new light.